something looks awry. As a young man, my son and me went to the doctor together, and we're both sitting there, little Jimmy, big Jimmy, while he's doing both exams at the same time. My son's pressure very good, and everything's looking good, and he's kind of smiling at me. Because I'm sure in his mind it's like, it's not affecting me. Not yet. Not completely, but life has a way of happening. And the Bible will not be, it does not lie. God has given us a way. Now, this thing about health is really just about obedience. It's not any different than any other principle. But when you get to certain principles in the Bible, we get a little uncomfortable. Dress reform, maybe. Jewelry, perhaps. Some of these other areas we start to pull back because now we're making decisions about, well, I see that, but I'm kind of going to go a little left of the center here. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and God knows my heart. Yeah, He does. They talked about that in Jeremiah. That our hearts are wicked, and who can know it? So here I come moving along with this diabetes, this disease that had attacked my body at the age of 40. I think it started when I was about 37. I started feeling the effects of it. Frequent urination, sometimes dizzy, sometimes sleepy when I should be alert after having a high sugar meal. Maybe a stop at 7-Eleven, and as I told you all before, QT, Circle K. These are gas stations, as I said in the past. It's really not a place for food, but I ate there. I ate there regularly and consistently, and I paid the price with that as those years went by. Having previously always being active in sports and so forth, and playing this and keeping moving around, I had hit a point where I'd started to just slow down just a little bit. And I got to think back, Darren, to the Garden of Eden. God never designed this body to be still. God did not write in His plan a retirement plan. I'm not picking on anybody who's retired. And there's a time when you may need to slow it down a little bit, but God never decided for you to be still. And science says the two most dangerous points in life is childhood and retirement. Wonder why that is. Somebody who's been active for 25, 30, 35 years, moving about, now wants to shift this thing back into cruise, as it were, and maybe get some of the senior discounts at the meal at Denny's, 55 and over, and just kind of take it easy. Planning all his day by what he's watching on the screen. It's another area. That's another sermon. Using that as a way. So this is me. I had slowed down. I had pushed back. I was taking it a bit more easy. Then, even though I wasn't retired, but I'd slowed down. It seems to happen in this American way. And it's happening even more so now. Science also says, unfortunately, that this is the first generation of young people who are going to die before their parents. Does the Word of God have anything to say about that? He's already said it, and if I were to go to Daniel chapter 1 and look at it, there were 3 Hebrew boys, led by one Daniel, 4 of them, sorry. And Daniel purposed in his heart that he had the delicacies, he had the opportunity to eat the kind of food, anything he wanted, he could eat. Sometimes there's things that are there that you might be desiring and say, man, if I just had an opportunity, I'd eat that. I never forget, I was a young man, and me and my sister had been spending a little time in West Virginia at my grandmother's house. It wasn't really like a vacation, like a breakaway. That's not something you were looking to go to. Grandma on that side wasn't fun. I had one down in Alabama who was a little different. But they wouldn't send me there because when I came back from Alabama, I didn't know how to act anymore. It was a lawless society down there. I could do anything I wanted. So they sent me to the Gestapo. So I'm there, and so she makes food, and she puts it out before us, and there's chicken there. And I said, I don't eat that. And my grandmother said, boy, ain't nothing wrong with that chicken. She did not espouse the same belief that I did. This mind that I had already purposed in my heart at somewhere 10 or 11 years old. I'm not going to eat this. My sister was on a different program, though. And she went ahead and was obedient. This time, she was obedient and decided to follow. These are choices. This obedience, this mindset of God with health just lines up with all the things in this Bible that are principles that God has given us. So all he's saying is just follow these principles and life's going to be better for you. Whether you're a heathen or a Christian, the principles of God protects men around finances, health, marriage, in so many areas. Why, as a young person, young people are sometimes now with this generation dying to break loose and get out into the world because they think there's something they're missing. And after the years go by, they're sad that they didn't just hold on and stay firm with the Lord. There ain't nothing out there. Solomon already said it, ain't nothing new under the sun. You're not going to find out something else. There's no new thing that you're going to get that we didn't get when we were young people. So God has put that wisdom in the hoary head. So here I was, a diabetic, and now I'm dealing with this disease. 40 years. I've already got sickness. What was I going to do? I already had the information. It was already available. I already had been there. Not unlike the Bible being there when we're struggling with certain other issues that we have in life. Often it's right in the Word of God. And we may be looking for popular opinion or somebody's mindset or some reasoning or something we've seen on TV maybe. It's right here. It's sure Word. It's solid, unchanging. The I am, the beginning and the end, Alpha and Omega. He's seen it all the way down. He's already telling you, here's what's going to happen. So what do you do, Jimmy? Well, I've got some clips in here, and we'll see if they're going to play. And I will play this clip. Let's see if it comes up. And maybe it's not here right now. This is the one that we talked about before, that basically there are some simple principles in life that I followed to help overcome my diabetes. As I told you before, I took no medication. It's been 17 years, and I have not taken any. By the grace of God. Not that I'm anything special. Like I told the seniors, I don't know why my story is so compelling. What is the power in my story? And then I shared with them. I looked back at one other known athlete, Jackie Robinson, and looked at his life. Jackie Robinson contracted diabetes as well. If you did not know, he was one of the top athletes, the first one to break into the major leagues. He was the rookie of the year he came in. He went to the All-Star game 6 times. He was in the World Series 6 times. But if you circle back, in high school, he was a 4-letter athlete. Basketball, football, track, and baseball. And he was on the tennis team. His brother Mac was so talented, he came in number 2 to Jesse Owens in the 200-meter dash in the Olympics. I'm talking about information, knowledge, capability that he had. By the time he was a senior or had gone to college, again, he was a 4-letter athlete, but he was an All-American in football, not in baseball. He had led the Pacific Coast Conference in basketball shooting for 2 seasons and had led also in terms of some of the track and field and the high jump or the broad jump. this young man was talented, but then it circles back and says, at the age of 37, he retired. Now, he came in as a rookie at 28, so he didn't get all the years that could have been his prime time, because he played those other years in the Negro League. But at the age of 37, he retired when they were about to trade him. But they also said in there that he was showing noticeable signs of diabetes. 37 years old. And I'm thinking to myself, that's about the time I contracted diabetes. 37 years old, and he's got it. And a friend of mine who used to be over the American Diabetes Association here in Tucson, they have since moved it, shut it down, and only have it over in Phoenix, said to me, I wonder if he wasn't a type 1 diabetic. Because with all that action and activity, you'd wonder why he'd be showing signs of diabetes. Because exercise often is the one thing that surpasses everything in removing excess sugar or glucose out of the body. So being a top athlete, how was he showing signs of diabetes at the age of 37? Still at the good point in his career. He still could have kept playing if he chose to. But there are these 10 principles that are very, very simple that we can take. Trust more, stress less. Stress could be a part of things that can cause or increase your issues with diabetes. Did you know that? Now when I thought about stress, I thought about Jesse Robinson, and you couldn't have been in a more stressful situation. They talked about the fact that when he went to the Philadelphia Phillies and they played him, they taunted him so bad his own players got upset. Till finally the league had to come down and said, you're going to stop it or we're going to suspend you. He said, I nearly cracked. He couldn't say anything. That was a part of the agreement. Don't say anything. You've got to be able to take it. You've got to be like Christ. You got to be one who can stand this kind of abuse. None of us are really aware of that level of abuse. You're talking about an entire stadium there. And he's got to keep his mouth shut. He can't ever show a sign of anger. He can't ever flinch. He can't even look like he's bothered by it. His diabetes, as I thought before, it just was diet. But I have to say that stress was at the highest possible level that a human could take for him. But he held. And they've come back with another book to talk about his spiritual relationship with the Lord. That he had prayed about it. And even the guy who brought him in, Richie, who said, I'm going to do this, went to a black church, spoke to the pastor and said, I don't know. He broke down crying and said, I don't know. I want to make him the first one, but I don't know if he can take it. Can we take it? God has said, I've designed you as a people. I'm going to give you a knowledge of information that most of these people don't have. That's why the seniors are looking at me like, where did you get this from? What school or university did you attend, young man? I haven't been to one on health. How do you know? How do you know that having refreshing rest could be that important? How are you so sure that enjoying sunshine is powerful to you? How do you know that nutrition is going to make the difference in your diabetes in your life? How do you know that exercise is going to work for you? Genesis chapter 1, we'll talk about that, and 129 talks about the diet that we should have. How do you know that water is so important even though this body is 70% water? How do you know? Do you have your MPH? How do you know that living temperately is important? Now you don't need to drink to get what you can get out of grapes because you can get it out of grapes unfermented. How do you know that investing time with others is more powerful? The Bible said it is more blessed to give than to receive. How do you know that fresh air is so important? And how did you know that you need to educate yourself with the Word of God and other things in health? How do you know, young man? God has given us a message and a knowledge that people don't know anything about. And as a result, as I became sick, I had to say, ascertain the cause. What's going on? The cause which I knew not, I searched out. What's going on with my body here? I don't feel right. So I leave there, like I told you, my blood sugar fasting was 286. After fasting for a night, that means my sugar must have been running well up into the 400s and 500s constantly. What that does is begin to destroy organs within the body. Diabetes is a disease that kills you on the inside. You can't necessarily see it. You might get the neuropathy and you lose the feelings on the ends or on your toes. That's why they tell you, don't cut your toenails because you might bleed. And you won't even feel it. Your vision begins to go and other things begin to happen in the body as it's shutting down because of the excess sugar moving around in the body. But God has said, listen, if you stay to that diet I gave you, you won't have that problem. Fruits, grains, and vegetables, that'll work for you. All the other excesses of life are going to put challenges on you. It's going to make it difficult for you. So now I knew. So we'll let Dr. Neil Bernard again share a little bit with us on what he has to say. So you can hear from science, not just from me and the Bible. Let's see what science has to say about this thing, diabetes.
Turning around an epidemic. 100 million Americans right now do have either diabetes or pre-diabetes, and that puts them at risk for amputations, for heart disease, for blindness, and we're exporting this epidemic overseas. Now, the word epidemic comes from Old Greek. Epi means on, demos means people. So an epidemic is something that we study with sterile statistics and maps and graphs, but the truth is it's something that impinges directly on people, on living, breathing human beings. But my story actually starts in the basement of a Minneapolis hospital. The year before I went to medical school, I was the morgue attendant, or as I like to say, the autopsy assistant. What that meant was, whenever anybody died, I would bring the body out of the cooler and put the body on an examination table, and the pathologist would come into the room. And one day, a person died in the hospital of a massive heart attack, probably from eating hospital food, but that's another story. So to examine the heart, you have to remove a section of ribs. And this is not done with great delicacy. You take what looks like a garden clipper, and you go crunch, crunch, crunch through the ribs on this side, and crunch, crunch, crunch through the ribs on this side. And the pathologist pulled this big pie wedge of ribs off the chest, set it on the table. And he knew that I was going to be going to medical school, so he wanted to make sure that I saw everything. He would say, Neil, look at this. These are the coronary arteries. We call them coronary because they crown the heart. And he sliced one open. He said, look inside. And so with my gloved finger, I poked around, and it wasn't a wide open artery. It had what was sort of like chewing gum inside, except that it was hard like a rock. And he said, that's your bacon and eggs, Neil. That's atherosclerosis. And we looked at the carotid arteries going to the brain, the arteries going to the legs, the arteries going to the kidneys. They all had this hardening of the arteries, this atherosclerosis. He said, we see the beginnings of this in 2/3 of people by age 23, which happened to be the exact age that I was at the time. So anyway, he writes up his findings, massive atherosclerosis, acute myocardial infarction, and he leaves the room. So I picked up the ribs and put them back in the chest, tried to make them fit right with the other ribs, and I sewed up the skin and cleaned up, and then I went out and went up to the cafeteria, where it turned out they were serving ribs for lunch. Now, let me tell you something. I knew about ribs. I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. I come from a long line of cattle ranchers, and I remember the smell of the cows out in the field. I remember the smell of the cows in my grandpa's barn. And I remember driving a load of cattle with my uncle to East St. Louis to the National Stockyards. And I remember the National Stockyards Hotel, $2 a night, and the smell of that room. And I have to say, every day of my life, it was roast beef, baked potatoes, and corn. Except for special occasions when it was roast beef, baked potatoes, and peas. And that's sort of the way we ate. But my father did not like the cattle business. So he left the family farm, and he went to medical school. And he spent his life at the Fargo Clinic treating diabetes. He became the diabetes expert for the whole region. And I have to say, my father really was frustrated because patients were given diets that they did not like. What we would say is, or what they would say is, diabetes is a condition where there's too much sugar in your blood. So don't eat anything that turns to sugar. So don't eat bread, don't eat fruit, don't eat pasta, don't eat rice, don't eat sweet potatoes, don't eat regular potatoes, don't eat beans, don't eat carrots. All these things had to be limited, and while you're at it, cut calories. And that's what people were supposed to adhere to. That gets old by Wednesday. Patients were also given medicines, and they were given needles and instruction on how to stick their fingers and how to inject insulin. And despite all of this, diabetes never got better. It always progressed.
So what could be the solution? When I was diagnosed, I changed my complete diet. Cut the fast food out. I changed what was in my kitchen, and I became active again. And in this activity, I started losing weight. I did not, as I told you before, some of this is pulling back. We will get forward. For those whose memories are very good. I did not go at this to lose weight. I went at it just changing what I was eating, and the weight came off naturally just because I was eating the high-fiber foods that were there. And let me say to you, I do not eat nearly as well then as I do now, not even close to as well. But I worked with the knowledge that I had. And as this weight was coming off, man, within 4 weeks, I was down a good 16 pounds. This weight was it was falling off of me. And I'm like wondering what's going on. It's happening so fast. As I told you, I lived in Worthington, and then right across the street was Worthington Foods. It was there, and they had everything set up for how they did the meat, and they grew and so forth. My timing for diabetes and Worthington Foods matches up real well. I told you that before. Much of what I was eating was in this realm and that realm. And I eat very little, which is Genesis 1:29, in the top realm. So by shifting that pie to be a lot more of what were the vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, and whole grains, down, the weight came off. The sugars normalized. I felt better just from the change is what happened. Right around 1999, this is the year before I was diagnosed, the Worthington Foods was sold and closed. It was sold off. Information that we had, knowledge that we have, things that we accepted and believed began, as the years have gone by, to not be quite so important. There were things that, as a young man, I would never find people doing within the church. Now, I don't know what they did in their house, and it wasn't any of my business. But there were standards that were held and upheld. God always has certain who keep up those standards, and they're going to be positive. This was me. I don't know if it looks like anybody else here, but that was me. So insanity would be doing the same exact thing and expecting a different result. That would mean if I follow the same mindset of how modern medicine, and there are people in modern medicine, allopathic medicine, who actually try to push the diet mindset. That's becoming much more prevalent today. But for me, I didn't go back to the doctor. He did not give me this information. I searched on my own, talked to friends, some of them physicians. What can I do? And many physicians will say to you, all you have to do is change your diet and lifestyle. But their mindset is they don't believe that most individuals will do it. They don't think they'll do it. So they go to the natural thing that will be, and they get out that pad, and they prescribe metformin usually, or some other type of drug. And again, as I said before, if you are on metformin and it's working for you and you're not doing the other things, don't make that change. If you're keeping that A1C low, Praise the Lord. But I am telling you that God has a way that if we work at it, that can work for us. But there are some times where you just have to have the medication. Don't get in your mind, as some Christians I have seen, that says, I will not take that medication, and their numbers remain out of control, and they put themselves in jeopardy. That is not God's way either. So there is balance that is involved here. Now he's going to tell you quickly what was the remedy for what these guys did. How
Always
they were
progressed.
able to turn it around.
And it then became something that we were exporting overseas. And when I got out of medical school, we had more medicines. And I think we had sharper needles. But to tell you the truth, it was the same sort of result. We had unhappy patients, and we never, ever cured this disease. It never turned around. It was always considered a progressive disease. But there were two scientific discoveries that really turned all of this around. And the first one was taking the widest possible lens. If you look around the world at those countries that have the least diabetes, like Japan, for example, they weren't following anything like the diet that we were giving to diabetic patients. They weren't saying, gee, I'm not going to eat rice, I won't eat noodles. They eat this kind of food all the time. It's front and center on their plate. And the second discovery came from looking inside the cell, especially the muscle cell. And the reason we look at muscle cells in particular is that's where glucose is going. That's where blood sugar is going. That's the fuel that powers your movement. You know about a person who's running a marathon? What are they doing in the weeks leading up for it? They're carbo loading. So they're eating pasta and they're eating bread to try to get that glucose into the cell for energy. And that is the problem in diabetes. Because glucose is there outside the cell trying to get inside. In order to get in, it needs a key, and that key is insulin. Now, what if I get home, and I'm getting up to my front door, and I take my key out of my pocket, I put it in the front door. Wait a minute, it's not working. And there's nothing wrong with my key, but I look in the lock, and while I was gone, somebody put chewing gum in my lock. So what am I going to do? Crawl in and out the window? No, I'm going to clean out the lock. Well, when a person has diabetes, their insulin key is not working. Why would that be? Why could insulin not signal this? What's supposed to happen is the glucose is supposed to enter into the cell. And glucose is the key that makes that happen. But the reason it doesn't happen, it's not that there's chewing gum inside the cell. What there is fat. Fat, little globules of fat. Now, I have to say, doctors hate words like fat. It's got one syllable. So we want to call it intramyocellular lipid. Intra means inside. Myo means muscle. Cellular means cellular. Lipid means fat. Intramyocellular lipid is fat inside your muscle cells. And that is what interferes with insulin's ability to work like a key to signal glucose coming in. Now, in 2003, the National Institutes of Health gave my research team a grant and said, let's test something completely different. Instead of limiting breads and all of these kinds of things, what if fat is the issue, what if we have a diet that has effectively no fat in it? Well, where does fat come from? It comes from two sources, animal products, animal fat, and vegetable oils. So we brought in 99 people, and we asked them to do two things. To really eat a bounty of food, not worrying about quantity. We're not counting calories here. We are not counting carb grams or anything like that. What we're doing instead is we're setting the animal product aside, keeping the vegetable oils low. Very simple. Now, one of our participants was a man named Vance. And Vance's father was dead by age 30. Vance was 31 when he was diagnosed with diabetes. He was in his late 30s when he came to see us. And he said, this is not hard. Unlike every other diet he'd been on, we didn't care how many carbs he ate or how many calories or how many portions. If he was having chili, not a meat chili, it would be a bean chili, chunky vegetable chili. If he was having spaghetti, instead of a meat topping, it would be topped with artichoke hearts and wild mushrooms and chunky tomato sauce and that kind of thing. Very, very easy. Over a course of about a year, he lost 60 pounds. His blood sugar came down and down and down. And one day his doctor sat him down and said, Vance, I know you've had family members die of this disease, but as I look at your blood tests, you don't have it anymore. And can you imagine what that feels like, to have family members who felt this was absolutely a one-way street and to have this disease just turn around? And when I asked Vance's permission to tell you about his story, he said, make sure you tell everybody that my erectile dysfunction went away too.
It has additional positives to that diet. This is a book called Worst Pills, Best Pills. You can get it at the library, find it anywhere. And here's what these doctors state. You have a greater likelihood of preventing what? By what? A change in your lifestyle can last a lifetime. 6 hours per night or less can cause diabetes. It doubles the chance of having diabetes. More people die from a want of exercise than from over fatigue. Just a good walk, getting out, exercising, a good brisk walk is 1 hour is equivalent to 5 units of insulin. You might say, hey, Jimmy, it's 100 and something out there. Do it early in the morning. I did it early this morning. It was warm. It was toasty this morning. But I got 2 things. I was also able to sweat, which is how the body cleanses itself. Vitamin D deficiency is very common, and we see a lot of that here in Arizona. Imagine that. I was in the Portland area a couple weeks ago, a lot cooler, but I could see them having a vitamin D deficiency. It's a lot of sunlight in the summer, but a lot of the other time, Michael, hey, he's changed. He used to be here, and now he's over there. Hey, they say 2 weeks of rain and 1 day of sun. I would not survive. I would not survive. Juices, as I talked about before, are actually fruits and vegetables that are what? Robbed of their fiber. Once you break it down like that, see, God designed this thing on the tree like that. Pick it, take it, peel it, and eat it. In His way that it's designed, it's going to come into the body naturally. Take the sugar up a little bit and then down because there's fiber with it. Once I juice it, I have separated the fiber. Now, all I have is Florida sunshine in a carton. Nice and sweet. Tastes so good in the morning. Makes me feel good, and my sugar is going through the roof. Whether diabetic or not, it's not the best way to go. I'm going to skip the other clip that he has and say the optimum diet is a high complex carbohydrate diet. That's it. Low in calories, high in dietary fiber. You're going to find that right from Genesis 1:29. A diet high in raw foods is recommended for a diabetic. You know, a lot of this will work for heart disease too. Has a lot of assistance for high blood pressure. It works well for the cancer patient. A lot of this is just going back to God's diet. Revelation 21, I believe, verse 2, for the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nation. God had designed that. Raw garlic and onion has been shown to reduce sugar in the urine. Now, if you're married, that combination might be difficult. You might be next to your spouse glowing a bit, having both of those at the same time. I have had a friend who really believed in this garlic thing, and when they were nearby, I knew it. You can get it in capsules, though, where it doesn't necessarily come back through. I'm sure this is more effective taken raw. Fresh onions should be eaten generously by diabetics. Greens, both cooked and raw, are very good. But we always say, hey, you got to have balance. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said, if we could give every individual the right amount of what? And not too little and not too much, we would have found the safest way to... This is not really difficult. This thing is not really difficult. But it is difficult if you are just spending a lot of time here at the American restaurants constantly. Because I have been there, I have looked through this. Sometimes I'll scan that menu over and over, and then I'm like, did I miss something? Let me go back. Moderation? Okay. But eating that type of food constantly is going to cause problems for you. A friend of ours, of my wife's, very good friend of hers, brother-in-law, had retired from the government. He worked in the, I believe the IRS or something as an attorney. And I retired at about 54, maybe 55. Set up everything well. His finances was all in order. Everything was good. And him and his wife were planning out their retirement. And I believe he was retired for about 2 years. Actually, I went and visited the friend of theirs, and I noticed they really didn't have any flatware that they used. They kept paper plates around because they had no real need for it. They had them there, but because of where they ate, all they needed was a paper plate. Everything they were eating was out. Everything this man ate was eaten out. And it was Thanksgiving about 2 years ago where his wife was heading out to take a plane to go visit her sister. And he went back in the house and the wife was downstairs. He went upstairs and all they heard was a thud on the floor. And it was over. It was over in a moment. Your body begins to give you signs. That I'm going to move through some of these other things that can help. Olives, string beans. This is really good. It's like, what functions like natural insulin for you. But I can give anybody who wants some of these remedies that can work at the end, or if they would like to get some copy of some of this. But I'll go to the very end. I want you all to think about the fact that God has a simple method that the world is beginning to embrace, but does not know as much about as we do. We're just like Daniel chapter 1, where Daniel made up his mind. Not just in that aspect, but in every aspect of his life, to follow God completely. Not this partial smorgasbord, I'll take this and I'm good with the rest of that. This is a whole thing. God does not require veganism or plant-based, I like to use. God does not require vegetarianism. He does require that there are meats that you should not eat. Now, if I stepped on some toes a little bit, I would have to remind you that for the many years that I ate meat that I believed were clean, I forgot one segment of what it says about the meat. No fat, no blood. It's a little tough for me. But the only meat that the Jews ate is kosher meat. So while I'm saying that I am obedient to the laws of God, maybe I need to go back and reread Leviticus and see what exactly it's saying. God is looking for a pure people without spot or wrinkle. I currently am not qualified, but I'm working through the blood of Christ to be everything He wants me to be. From diet to exercise to a love for my fellow man. Because me knowing about health does not make me the health police. Please eat at the potluck whatever you want to eat. I am not here to look over your shoulder and decide what you have. I'm not going to have your aches and you're not going to have mine later. This situation is between you and the Lord. So whatever you hear speaking to you, let that be connected by the Holy Spirit. But if we are going to be the kind of people that will be ready as we feel the tectonic plates shifting. If you're not seeing this, you're missing something. These tectonic plates are shifting now. And this spiritual warfare is at its highest level. And if there's anything in your soul that's not connected with the Lord, you need to ask the Lord to give you the strength to give it up, to be 100% with Him. May the Lord bless each of us and give us the power to stand in His complete Word.